What if the North broke the wheel before Daenerys ever dreamed of doing it? What if Eddard Stark, Warden of the North, Lord of Winterfell and Hand of the King, returned from King's Landing not in chains or a casket, but alive, changed, and burning with the idea of freedom? Imagine if instead of bending the knee again, Ned Stark stood beneath the godswood, looked at the faces of his ancestors, and declared the North a republic, free from southern rule, free from thrones and dragons and lies. Sounds impossible, right? But trust me, what happens next would split the Seven Kingdoms in two, and what you're about to hear, it changes everything. It started with whispers. Even before Ned Stark's horse crossed the gates of Winterfell, ravens carried the rumors faster than snowstorms. The man who had once sat silently at Robert Baratheon's side now spoke of justice not as a royal decree, but as a right of the people. And people listened. Lords grumbled behind closed doors, of course, but the small folk, they leaned in. Because for the first time in generations, someone important spoke like they mattered. When Ned returned, Catelyn was the first to notice it. He hugged his children tightly, Jon too, longer than ever before, and when she asked him what truly happened in King's Landing, he said only this: "I knelt to protect a crown that does not protect its people. Never again." And just like that, Ned Stark, the most honorable man in the realm, did something no one expected. He refused the next raven from the Iron Throne. Burned it. No reply. The message was loud and clear. Now here's where it gets crazy. The moment Ned started gathering bannermen, not to march to war but to form a council, that's when the South started panicking. The Lannisters called it treason. Stannis called it madness. But the North? The North called it hope. Each house sent one man or woman to Winterfell. Manderleys, Karstarks, Glovers, even wildlings came, curious about this northern republic they'd heard about from wandering crows and rumor hunters. And Ned, he didn't sit on a throne. He stood before them, sword sheathed, and said, "No man or family will rule the North again. Not even House Stark." Wait, what? Did Ned just give up power? Yes, and it shocked everyone. Okay, pause, be honest. If you know Ned Stark, this might feel off. But think about it. After watching Robert die, Joffrey seize power and the Lannisters murder children, while the small council looked away. How could he return and play that same game? Honor doesn't mean obeying a broken system. It means changing it. The first free assembly of the North met beneath the Heart Tree in Winterfell. Each representative stood as equal. Manderley next to Umber, Wildling beside Noble. It was chaos. But Ned listened. And when disagreements rose, and oh boy they did, he didn't raise a sword. He raised his voice. "We are the shield that guards the realms of men," he reminded them. "And now we must guard our own from kings and crowns alike." But here's the twist. Not everyone agreed. Robb Stark, young and fierce, believed this would only weaken them. "Father, we need unity. A crown unites." But Ned, who had knelt too many times to too many false kings, shook his head. "A crown blinds, Robb. It makes men forget who they serve." Tension rose. Robb wasn't alone. Some bannermen, especially those closer to the southern border, felt uneasy. Without a king, who commands armies? Who defends the wall if the wildlings cross again? Who makes the decisions when the snows come and the food runs low? Ned's answer: the council decides. And for the first time, the North prepared to rule itself. Now let me tell you, this sent shockwaves through Westeros. In King's Landing, Cersei called for Ned's head. She offered gold for his capture, claiming he was plotting rebellion. But Tyrion, always the observer, simply sipped his wine and said, "Perhaps he's not rebelling. Perhaps he's evolving." And here's where the real problems start. Because a free North? That inspires others. In the Riverlands, Tully vassals began meeting in secret. In the Vale, whispers reached the Eyrie. Even Dorne sent a raven, sealed not with a threat but curiosity. But then, Littlefinger re-enters the game. You didn't think he'd stay quiet, did you? Petyr Baelish, ever the master of chaos, saw Ned's republic not as a threat but an opportunity. He sent men north, cloaked in merchant's garb, whispering to every lord who still doubted, "What stops House Karstark from becoming kings of Karhold? Why should the Starks get a seat at the table when you built the roads, raised the walls, bled for the land?" Division, poison, classic Littlefinger, and slowly, cracks began to form. Meanwhile, Ned faced a harder challenge, convincing the Night's Watch to acknowledge the new system. The Watch, technically neutral, saw the change as political meddling. But when Ned rode to Castle Black with Jon, the meeting was tense. Sir Alistair mocked him. "So you'll elect wildlings to rule next?" But Jon, now older, sharper, more scarred, stepped in. "The realm has had kings and still burned. Maybe it's time we tried something else." That moment mattered. Jon's voice carried weight, and the Watch, though reluctant, agreed not to oppose the new North as long as the wall stayed manned. But back in Winterfell, trouble brewed. Robb, growing restless, gathered his own loyal men. Not to rebel, at least not yet, but to prepare. And then came the Lannister message. Not a raven, an army. 1,000 men crossing the neck, banners high, steel sharp. Sent not by Joffrey, but Tywin. The Lion wanted order. And blood, you still watching? Good, because what happens next is where honor meets fire. Rather than rallying the entire North to fight, Ned did something no one saw coming. He sent a raven, not to King's Landing, but to Dragonstone. To Stannis Baratheon. What? Why? Because Ned knew something others forgot. The Lannisters would never stop until they bent the North. Stannis, for all his coldness, hated Lannister corruption more than anyone. "Come north," Ned wrote. "Not as king, as justice." Stannis hesitated. But Davos, with his onion-worn wisdom, persuaded him. The North doesn't need a king, but they might need a sword. And so, for the first time in history, the Baratheon fleet sailed not for conquest but for alliance. But let's not forget Catelyn. Watching her husband dismantle the old ways terrified her. She had married into the North expecting lords and laws, not councils and charters. Her letters to Riverrun turned darker, full of worry. He's building something new, but burning what made us strong. And in the shadows, Bran dreamed, not walking, not yet, but seeing a three-eyed raven in his sleep. And every dream ended with the same vision, a weirwood tree burning, and a wolf howling in chains. Now I know what you're thinking. What the hell does that mean? Keep watching, because this is just the beginning. Watching, because this is just the beginning. The snow fell harder now. Not the kind that dances lightly through the air, but thick, heavy, war-born snow. In Winterfell, the winds screamed like old gods angry at the world they watched break. Ned Stark stood at the balcony of the Great Hall, watching the banners of the arriving houses flutter in the blizzard. Not one carried the sigil of the crown. And yet, for the first time in generations, Winterfell was more than just the seat of a great house. It had become something else, an idea, a cause, a spark threatening to catch fire across the entire continent. The council was in session again. Seated in a rough half-circle were lords and warriors, wildlings and even one crannogman, Howland Reed, who'd arrived 2 days earlier with muddy boots and fire in his voice. "You're not just remaking the North," he said when he arrived. "You're tearing out its spine to build a better one." Ned had smiled slightly, then said, "No, I'm asking it to stand taller." But not everyone saw it that way. Robb Stark stood near the door, arms crossed, jaw tight. Every vote in that room felt like a stone cast against his inheritance. He'd trained his whole life to be Lord of Winterfell. The North sword, its shield. But what was he now in a republic? Just another voice. And then came the raven from the twins, Walder Frey. He didn't address Ned by title, just Stark. The message was brief, dripping with disdain. "Your little experiment in peasant rule offends the gods. House Frey stands with the crown. We expect loyalty, or we prepare for siege." Robb's fist slammed into the table so hard the inkpot spilled. "We should ride for the twins and silence him." But Ned only raised a hand. "You don't silence a man like Frey by sword. You silence him by making him irrelevant." "Wait. What? Okay, pause. This is a big moment. Because in traditional Westeros logic, disrespect from a rival house means war. Steel, fire, blood. But Ned Stark, he was playing a different game. One built on legacy, not legacy titles. Instead of war, Ned turned to the council and proposed something radical. Again, let the people of the Neck vote. If Frey's men rule through fear, give them another path. Let them choose their own leader. You could hear the silence echo off the stone walls. A lord of House Serwyn stood, face red. "You mean to let commoners defy noble blood?" "What if they choose a butcher?" Ned replied, calm and cold. "If the butcher feeds them better than the Lord bleeds them, then perhaps he's earned it." Now that line, it lit a fire. In the Riverlands, whispers of Ned's words became rallying cries. Farmers recited them in taverns. Smiths carved them into steel. And then, something crazy happened. The first Northern Charter was signed, not by kings. Not by lords, but by 1,000 hands, some calloused, some ink-stained. It declared that no one man would ever again decide the fate of the North alone. That law would be forged in the open, not behind castle doors. That honor would not be inherited. It would be earned. This terrified the South because if it worked in the North, it could spread, and it did. In White Harbor, the people gathered and demanded that the city choose its own judge from among the guilds. In the Vale, some whispered that Ned's dream was what Jon Arryn once died for. Even in Dawn, yes, Dawn observers began watching this republic of ice and honor with cautious admiration. But in the shadows of King's Landing, Varys watched, worried. When one wolf howls for freedom, he told Tyrion, others may follow. And chaos does not ask permission. Let's talk about Tyrion for a second, because he, more than anyone, understood what Ned was really doing. It's not about ruling, Tyrion told Bronn. It's about memory. Stark wants to be remembered not as a lord, but as the man who unchained the North. And that scared Queen Cersei. She summoned the council, demanded options. Pycelle babbled about traitors. Littlefinger suggested assassins. But it was Jaime who spoke the bitter truth. You can't kill an idea, especially when it's dressed in honor. Still, Cersei tried. 3 riders left King's Landing in the dead of night. 1 rode west to Frey, 1 rode east to Jon Royce in the Vale, and 1 rode north, hidden among traders, with a single task: kill Ned Stark. But here's where things get wild. The assassin made it as far as Moat Cailin. But before he could cross into Winterfell, he was stopped. Not by soldiers. Not by guards, by Arya, yes, Arya. She'd grown harder since her father's return. Colder, not cruel, but always watching. And when she caught the rider in the dark woods, she didn't hesitate. Needle flashed, 1 cut. A letter spilled from the assassin's cloak, blood-stained but legible. It was signed by Cersei herself. Ned read it with trembling hands. Not from fear, but disappointment. She's learned nothing, he said quietly. Still playing games while the board burns. He gathered the council. Read the letter aloud. Then he made his boldest move yet. We will open the North to exiles, he declared. Anyone who rejects the tyranny of crown or corruption of coin will find shelter in our lands, refugees, dissidents, dreamers. Robb nearly exploded. You'll bring the 7 kingdoms down on us. But Ned's voice was steady. Then let them come. They'll find a people, not soldiers, standing in their way. At the wall, word of the Republic reached Samwell Tarly, who'd begun copying old Night's Watch records. He found tales, old half-burned scrolls, of first men who ruled by assembly, not sword. Perhaps, he whispered, we're not breaking tradition. We're remembering it. But not all memory is kind, because deep in the crypts of Winterfell, Bran's dreams grew darker. He saw visions, wheels of fire, dragons in chains, and a red woman whispering of shadows in the snow. And one night, he said it aloud to Mira, something is coming, something that does not care about kings or councils, only death. Meanwhile, south of the Neck, Tywin Lannister gathered his full force, not to negotiate, to invade. His logic was simple. You kill the idea before it spreads, so 20,000 men began marching north. And Ned, he didn't raise an army. He raised the land. Every village, every holdfast, every house, he sent out word, you are the North. Not me, not Winterfell, you, and they came. Not all to fight, some to speak. Some to shelter, some to witness, because whatever happened next, it would mark the future. Either the North would stand as free men, or fall as a memory. And trust me, you're not ready for how this ends. You're not ready for how this ends. The Lannisters didn't march with stealth. They never did. Their banners bled gold and crimson, bold against the grey sky as if daring the world to look away. 20,000 strong, with siege engines, supply trains, and cold ambition in every step. Tywin Lannister led them not as a man of war, but as a man of order. He'd conquered the rebellious Riverlands once. He'd crushed houses that dared raise a single banner without royal permission, and now he would do it again. Only this time he wasn't marching toward rebels. He was marching toward something far more dangerous, an idea. Winterfell prepared, but not in the way Tywin expected. There were no massed armies waiting at the gates, no lords calling for vengeance. Instead, there was something colder, sharper. The North had gone quiet. The council, now known among the people as the First Assembly, met daily in the Great Hall. They didn't discuss war tactics. They debated strategy of the heart. We cannot defeat Tywin with numbers," said Mage Mormont, "but we can defeat him with will." The plan wasn't to stop the Lannisters in open battle. It was to make every step north cost them something, not just blood, but purpose. Villages emptied, crops burned, roads became traps, trees fell, rivers flooded. The North bent but didn't break, because the North was no longer a realm, it was a people. Han Tywin, for all his genius, had never fought ghosts before, but let me tell you what really turned the tide. It wasn't swords, it was a voice. Okay, pause. If you're still with me, what happens now might blow your mind, because just when Tywin thought the North was collapsing into disorder, a single raven landed on his command tent. No crest, just a scrap of old parchment, one sentence: "You are not marching against rebels. You are marching against a republic." Tywin scoffed. Words. He ordered it burned. But the words stuck, because his scouts, those who made it back, spoke of towns that didn't cower but confronted, of men who didn't flee but argued. "They don't have leaders," one said. "They have decisions." But that didn't stop the advance. The first true clash happened at the last hearth. Tywin expected an easy victory. House Umber had never been diplomatic, and their forces were half-trained farmers. But the Umbers didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like survivors. They ambushed, retreated, then ambushed again. They didn't defend the castle. They defended every tree, every stone. And when the castle did fall, Tywin found it empty. The people had vanished. The banners were gone. Only a single sentence was carved into the walls of the Great Hall. "This land doesn't belong to kings. It belongs to us." Now here's the insane part. The Republic wasn't winning battles, but it was winning minds. Even some within Tywin's camp began to murmur. A few lower bannermen, young idealistic sons, started questioning. Why are we killing people who just want to govern themselves? One night, Sir Elric of House Faring deserted after reading the charter smuggled into the camp by ravens. Tywin executed 5 men that night. His command was clear. "We do not fight philosophy. We crush it," but that only fed the fire. Back in Winterfell, Ned Stark knew the final test was coming. He walked alone through the crypts, speaking to statues as if they could answer. "Bran dreams of fire," he told his ancestors. "Arya kills in shadows. Robb stares at me like a ghost of a future he's losing. I never wanted to be anything but a man doing his duty. And now, I may die for an idea I barely understand," yet he didn't back down. When the reports came that Tywin's army had reached the Wolf's Wood, he didn't call for a final stand. He called for a speech. Yes, a speech, but not to nobles, not to the council, to the people. He stood atop the battlements, snow in his beard, wind howling like the old gods were listening. Below him, thousands gathered, not warriors, but blacksmiths, fishers, daughters, old men. Every age, every house, every corner of the North. And he said this: "If we fight them with steel, we may lose. If we fight them with fire, we may all burn. But if we fight them with truth, with unity, with the belief that no man rules us unless we allow it, then they cannot win." The North remembers. But now the North decides. They roared not like soldiers, like citizens. That same night, something impossible happened. A raven arrived from the wall, not just from the watch, but from Jon Snow. He had seen something. Something beyond the Lannisters, White Walkers, Whites, death that marched without banners or politics. His message? "We are arguing over crowns while the dead walk. If the North falls now, we all die later. Winter is not coming. It is here." Ned read it aloud, and the silence that followed was heavier than steel. Then came the dilemma. Fight Tywin now, or unite against the true enemy. Robb was furious. "We can't retreat. If we show weakness, he'll destroy everything." But Arya said, "He won't understand strength until he has nothing left to take." It was Sansa, yes. Sansa, who proposed the path forward. "Let him take Winterfell," she said. "Let him wear it like a crown of ash. And when he sits on our chair, we'll show him the throne means nothing without the people." So they did something unthinkable. They evacuated Winterfell, every man, woman, child. Gone in a night, they left behind letters, testimonies, proof of the charter, of the council, of a republic built not on walls but on people. Tywin entered Winterfell to find it empty. No lords, no armies, no captives, just a chair carved from weirwood and a scroll. "You have taken a shell. The heart is gone. The North cannot be ruled." "Only followed," Tywin raged. "Burned what remained. Claimed the city for the crown. But in the woods, the North lived. They scattered, rebuilt, held councils by firelight, voted, and sent ravens. And across Westeros, the crack spread. The Riverlands refused to pay taxes to the Iron Throne. The Vale sent observers to the north to learn their methods. Dorne began drafting their own charter. Even the Crownlands saw protests in the streets and in the shadows of Dragonstone. Stannis watched, thought, waited. But before he could act, before Tywin could respond, the snow turned black. The dead had reached the wall. And now, everything would change, because while men argued over freedom, death marched on everyone. Death made no speeches. It didn't negotiate. It didn't care about republics, kingdoms, or crowns. It came with silence and snow, and it came for everyone. When the wall fell, not shattered like stone, but overwhelmed, drowned in whites climbing in endless waves, it wasn't just the Night's Watch that screamed. The entire North felt it. Ravens couldn't even fly fast enough. Jon Snow, bloodied and half-frozen, rode south himself. He had seen the Night King, watched him raise the dead with a single gesture. "You're all still debating who should lead," he told the council in the woods outside Old Winterfell, "while death doesn't care who's in charge." Ned Stark looked at his son, the boy he'd raised like his own, and for a long time he said nothing. Then finally, "So we stop debating. We act together." Here's where it all twisted. Because the Republic, this fragile, radical thing, had just enough momentum to survive a political war. But a war with the dead? That would either make or break it. And the choices that followed changed everything. First, they had to rebuild trust fast. Messengers were sent to the wildlings, not with bribes or threats, but with truth. "Your children will die too," Arya told them at the edge of the gift. "So help us or bury them." The wildlings listened, not because they trusted the South, but because Jon Snow spoke their language. And when Tormund arrived with 3,000 free folk, they didn't come as pawns. They came as equals. The council gave them seats. That one move? Historic. Then the North turned to Stannis. The man had been waiting in the east, quiet and calculating. He'd claimed to be king, then backed away when he saw the Republic rise. But now he saw a new chance to matter. Davos met Ned beneath the heart tree. "Stannis will fight," Davos said. "He'll bring fire and men. But he wants one thing," Ned nodded. "A throne?" Davos shook his head. "I say." And so the unthinkable happened. Stannis Baratheon marched north, not as a conqueror, not as a king, but as a citizen of the realm sworn to protect the living. He didn't like the council. He called it chaotic rabble, but he fought for it. That made all the difference. Now let's talk about King's Landing. When Cersei heard the wall had fallen, she laughed. "Let the snow eat itself," she said. They chose this path. But Tyrion knew better. "When ice breaks," he warned, "it doesn't care who stands on it." Still, Cersei refused to act. She believed the dead were exaggeration, northern tricks to draw attention from their treason. Even when Tywin sent ravens desperate for reinforcements, she didn't move. "If my father can't hold the north, then he's not the man I thought he was." Pause. That moment. A dagger in the legacy of House Lannister, because Tywin Lannister, burner of Castamere, breaker of lords, was now trapped in a ghost castle surrounded by snow, listening to bones snap in the night. His men, once proud lions, had become caged beasts. Supplies ran low. Deserters vanished into the trees, never seen again. Every morning a few more were found stiff and pale, their eyes blue as shattered sky. And then the dead reached Winterfell. But this Winterfell wasn't walls and stone, it was the people. They had prepared, not with battlements, but with alliances. They led the dead into traps, burned pits in the Wolfswood, flooded valleys near the Barrowlands, bottlenecks through canyons rigged with oil and flame. The council's unity made them fast. And Jon Snow? He became something else entirely. Not a Stark, not a bastard, a symbol. He led the first charge at the Weeping Hollow, where 3,000 whites marched in silence. He rode with Ghost beside him, flaming sword in one hand, and every man who followed did so not because of birthright but belief. Because here's the real twist. The Republic didn't just survive the long night, it led the charge against it. Each house contributed what it could. The Manderleys sent ships up the coast, with dragon-glass-tipped ballistae. The Glovers grudgingly crafted flame barrels. Even the sisters, long silent, built floating traps. And Arya, she became Death's Whisper. She moved behind the enemy lines unseen, slipping into abandoned castles now crawling with wights. One night she returned with something impossible, a shard of ice, still warm, taken from a White Walker she'd killed herself. "Strike their leaders," she whispered, "and their shadows fall." Meanwhile, Bran, he had changed. The dreams were no longer dreams. He sat beneath the trees, still for hours, even days. Mira said his eyes went white and wept. "I've seen the end," he finally told them. "And? It's not fire or ice that wins. Then what?" Memory. What does that mean? We don't know yet. Because just as the North began pushing the dead back, just as they reached the shattered remains of the wall and lit the sky with dragon-glass flame, the Night King changed his tactics. He didn't just raise the dead, he raised someone else, Tywin. Lannister. That's right, they had left him to die when the final siege began. No one expected his body to survive, but the Night King took it, and when he returned, pale-eyed and silent, wearing lion armor stained with frost, he marched not against the North, but south toward the throne. Now stop, breathe, because this moment, this is where it all flips. Cersei, still stubborn in King's Landing, now faces the one thing she cannot outdrink, outplot, or outfight. Her own father, dead, cold, and marching with 10,000 others like him. And guess who she calls for? Not her armies, not her gold. She sends a raven. To Ned Stark, help us, yes, the woman who wanted him dead. The queen who branded the North as traitors now begs for aid. And Ned, he doesn't laugh, he doesn't gloat. He simply gathers the council, holds the letter aloft and says, "Now the realm understands what we've always known. That power is not held in castles or crowns. It's held in people. And the people will decide." Jon Snow steps forward. "We ride south, not as kings, as one realm." And for the first time in the history of Westeros, armies from the north, wildlings, riverlanders, Baratheon men, even some Ironborn, march not to conquer each other, but to save everyone. They saw the smoke before they saw the sea. Not the kind of smoke that came from hearths or chimneys, but a heavy black pillar that climbed toward the sun like a warning. The dead had reached King's Landing, but this time the city didn't scream in chaos, at least not at first. Cersei had seen the raven, read the words, and for once understood that survival meant swallowing her pride. "Call off the gold cloaks," she ordered. "Open the gates to the north." Pause, did you catch that? Cersei Lannister, who once burned septs and shattered alliances rather than share power, was now opening her gates not for kings, not for queens, but for northerners, wildlings, and Republic banners. When Ned Stark and Jon Snow rode through the gates with their coalition behind them, silence gripped the capital. Thousands watched from balconies, rooftops, windows. No jeers, no cheers. Just stunned faces. They weren't here to conquer. They were here to save. But King's Landing wasn't ready. The small folk didn't understand why wildlings walked free. Nobles didn't know what to make of the Council of the Living, formed in the Dragon Pit, within hours of arrival. 7 leaders sat at the table. Ned Stark, Jon Snow, Davos Seaworth, Arya Stark, Tormund Giantsbane, Samwell Tarly, and, believe it or not, Tyrion Lannister. Because when the end comes, politics dies. Now here's where it gets insane. The plan was simple, defend the city. But the North didn't just bring swords. They brought knowledge, dragon-glass weapons, fire pits built to burn in the streets, watchtowers rigged with tar. Arya personally trained the Goldcloaks in stealth strikes. Sam introduced plans for collapsing tunnels beneath the city if the Whites breached the walls. They worked like one body, one mind. For the first time in centuries, every corner of the realm moved together. Even Brienne of Tarth returned, leading refugees from the Stormlands. Even the Martells sent ships to evacuate small folk down the coast. And then they came. The Night King didn't attack with fury. He came with patience, quiet. The army of the dead arrived like a tide, slow, relentless, drowning everything in its path. You could hear them before you saw them. The crunch of bones, the dragging of swords, the low, endless groaning of mouths that no longer spoke. From the walls, Sansa watched them stretch across the horizon. "So many," she whispered. Davos muttered. "Too many." Jon turned to Ned. "This is it." Ned only nodded. "Then let them see what the realm looks like when it stands together. What followed was chaos, but not collapse. King's Landing held the line. Fire burst from alleyways, lighting undead like torches. Archers rained dragon-glass-tipped arrows from the towers. Jon led the charge from the Gate of the Gods, while Tormund fought shoulder to shoulder with men who once wanted to kill him. And Arya vanished into the city. Every time a White Walker stepped too far, it fell. Every time the Night King moved. Shadows followed him. She was hunting. But the turning point didn't come on the battlefield. It came in the Red Keep. Because that's where Bran had gone. You didn't forget about Bran, did you? While the armies fought outside, Bran sat alone in the chamber that once held dragons, eyes white, skin pale. He had gone beyond sight, beyond time, and suddenly he woke. "I know what he is," he whispered. Sam turned to him. "Who?" "The Night King, and here it comes. You ready?" The Night King was once a Stark. Yeah, let that sink in. Long ago, before the wall, before castles, there was a first man, chosen by the children of the forest, twisted by magic, turned into a weapon. That man had Stark blood. Bran saw it, saw the face, saw the truth. "He doesn't just want to kill us," Bran said. "He wants to erase himself. End the line that made him. End the memory of what was done. That changes everything. Because this isn't about victory anymore. This is about legacy." Bran told Ned. Ned told the council. And for the first time in history, they knew their enemy wasn't just marching to destroy the living. It was marching to destroy history. And that meant Bran was the real target. So Jon came up with a plan. A trap. Let the Night King into the city. Let him come for the Red Keep and wait for Arya. Now listen, this wasn't a decision made easily. Thousands would die letting the enemy in. But if they could take out the Night King, it would all end. The plan was agreed upon. Barely. At midnight, the gates were thrown open. The Whites surged in like locusts. But the city fought like hell. Flame burst from sewers. Walls collapsed, burying dozens of dead. Ballistae turned inward, firing at rooftops crawling with corpses, and in the middle of it all, Jon stood at the Sept of Baelor, waiting. The Night King found him there. The final standoff. Jon drew Longclaw. Fire behind him. Ice before him, the two circled. Not a word, just steel and silence, and then contact. They fought like storms, Jon faster, more desperate. The Night King slower, colder, methodical. Twice Jon fell, twice he rose, but he couldn't win, and just as the Night King raised his hand to finish it, a whisper of wind, a blade in the dark, Arya, again. She struck from behind, dragonglass dagger piercing spine. Same hand she used against the walker at Winterfell, but this time, it didn't kill him. What? Yep, you heard right. He didn't die. He turned, grabbed her, lifted her, and for a second it looked like it was over. But then Bran appeared, not walking, not talking, but glowing, his eyes lit with fire. The weirwood. Network, the entire memory of Westeros surged through him, and he whispered one word, home. The Night King froze. Something inside him cracked. Bran showed him his life before transformation, before death, before war, and for one moment the Night King remembered. He let go, collapsed, shattered, and with him every corpse in the city fell too. The war was over, but the cost was everything. Half the city burned, thousands dead. The Iron Throne melted in the chaos, gone, but in its place a circle, 7 chairs, no throne, no ruler, just representatives from every land, every house, every people, and at the center, the Republic, not of ice and honor anymore, but of memory, of survival, of choice. The fire had gone out of the sky, but not out of the world. The war was over, the dead were gone, and yet silence hung heavier than victory. The smoke that once choked King's Landing began to drift away, revealing a broken city, but not a conquered one. Walls had fallen. The Red Keep was a ruin. The Sept of Baelor, where Jon had nearly died, was reduced to stone and ash. And at the heart of it all, where the Iron Throne had once stood in twisted shadow, there was only scorched rock, and the weight of what came next. No one celebrated. How could they? There was no king to crown, no feast to prepare, just the council, just the people. They met in the dragon pit again, but it was no longer a gathering of the desperate. It was something different, something sacred, the place where everything could begin again. The new circle held more than lords. Light held voices. From the Reach came Garland Tyrell, not as a lord of Highgarden, there was no Highgarden anymore, but as a representative of the fertile lands and broken families who survived. From Dawn, Nyra Sand arrived, speaking not as a princess but as a daughter of fire, who had seen too many kings make corpses out of pride. Even the Iron Islands sent someone. Not a Greyjoy, a salt wife from Harlow, who stood barefoot on the stone and said, "We've taken enough. Now we give." And the North? They sent no one, because the North had already spoken. Ned Stark entered last, not in armor, not in furs, in plain grey. He stood where the throne used to be and said nothing at first, only looked at the circle, at his children, at the ghosts, and then he said, "We've built our world on stories, on dragons and kings and bloodlines, but stories lie. They forget the hungry, they forget the wronged, and in the end they burn." He turned. "The dead came for us all, and we stood together. Not because of blood, but because of choice." Then softly, "I choose not to rule." That's right, Ned Stark, the man who could have taken the realm, the man who defied kings and broke the North away, refused power once more. Jon stepped forward and paused. People expected him to speak next. But he didn't. He looked to Tyrion, because Jon had killed. Had led, had bled, but Tyrion had survived them all, and so it was the broken Lannister who addressed the realm. "This is not a council," he said. "It's not a court. It's not a game. It's what comes after the wheel is broken." He gestured around. "We don't crown a king. We appoint voices, voices that can be replaced, challenged, and questioned." Pause. "This realm does not need a hero. It needs memory, and that memory must never again wear a crown." There it was, the death of monarchy, just like that, and the beginning of the Republic of Westeros. The structure they agreed upon wasn't perfect. Of course not. It was raw, new, but it was alive. Every region, North, Riverlands, Dorne, the Reach, the Westerlands, the Vale, the Iron Islands, would elect a speaker. Those speakers would rotate leadership every season. Decisions would require 4 of 7 voices in agreement, and most radical of all, each speaker could be removed by a vote of the people. No bloodline. No inheritance, just choice. Now, did everyone accept this? Of course not. In the shadows, old forces stirred. Jon Royce in the Vale scoffed at the notion of peasants voting, Aegon's supporters. Yes, they still existed, claimed the true heir to the Targaryen line was in hiding across the sea, and in the Westerlands, remnants of House Lannister whispered of vengeance, but they had no armies, no dragons, no people, because the people were tired of fire, tired of crowns, tired of watching their sons die for symbols made of steel. Let me show you how it all ended. Sansa Stark stayed in King's Landing, not as Queen in the North, but as Speaker of the North. Her voice calm, clear, unshakable. Arya disappeared. Some say she sailed west beyond the maps. Others say she walks among the free folk, teaching children to never fear shadows. Was never seen again. He vanished one morning beneath a weirwood tree and left behind only a single message written in Old Tongue. Memory must be free. Tormund returned to the true North, where the free folk chose their own paths. Gendry, once a blacksmith, helped rebuild the city, not for lords, but for everyone. He was never called lord again. He refused it. Tyrion? He died many years later, old, tired, holding a book in his hands titled How the World Ended Twice. And Jon Snow? He didn't take a seat in the circle. He never did. He walked away after the war. North, always north. Ghost beside him, eyes forward. Some say he became legend. Others say he found peace. But one thing is certain, he never bowed again. Not to a king, not to a god, not to anything but the living and the Iron Throne. Gone, melted, forgotten, replaced by something stronger. Choice. So next time someone tells you power lies in blood or crowns or fire, you tell them this. The North remembered, and then the realm remembered too, and that changed everything. And that changed everything.